morning and welcome to Business Today. I am Umar Kaltungo. Now we kick off this week with a review of most of the stories that went the rounds throughout last week. We will begin with the capital market, of course. We're talking about the over the trade counter securities exchanges. Now the FMDQ OTC Securities Exchange has launched an investor protection fund, that is IPF, to boost and sustain investors' confidence in the Nigerian capital market. Following the establishment, Mrs. Titi Helen Alawani, representing the Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria, was appointed the chairperson of the Board of Trustees, while Mrs. Tokumbo Ajayi, representing the Association of Corporate Trustees, emerged the vice president. The exchange, in a statement, said the establishment of the fund was in compliance with the provisions of Part 14 of the Investors and Securities Act 2007 and represents a major milestone in the achievement of its mandate to provide a secure and credible platform supported by global best practices. Now, the FMDQ Investor Protection Fund was established for the purpose of compensating investors who suffer pecuniary losses arising from insolvencies, bankruptcy, or negligence, and of course, negligence of the dealing members of the OTC exchange, that is over the trade counter exchanges, as well as defalcation committed by dealing members or any of its directors, officers, employees, or representatives in relation to securities, money, or any property entrusted to, received, or deemed received by the dealing member in the course of its capital market activities. Though through this landmark achievement, the OTC exchange is positioned to support the investor protection mandate of the Securities and Exchange Commission, which was guided by a 10-year Nigerian Capital Market Master Plan launched, which it was launched like since 2005 for the purpose of compensating investors whose losses are not recovered under the Investor Protection Fund, which was admitted by security exchanges. But then, we will move away from the capital market onto the oil and gas industry. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, has indicated that it will clear its cash call debts to its joint venture partners in oil production before the anniversary of the first $400 million payment it made to them in April this year. Now, which is in April 2018, it would have cleared all its debts. But according to the NNPC's Group Managing Director, Dr. Mekanti Baru, at the inauguration of the reconstituted NNPC Anti-Corruption Committee, that the 4 upstream investments it recently entered into with its JV partners will provide incremental revenue worth about $30 billion to the national treasury in the next 10 years. Now, the NNPC in December 2016 got a discount of about $1.7 billion from the $6.8 billion it owed its JV partners as cash call obligations and was asked to pay about $5.1 billion. That is, instead of paying the about 6.1 or so. Now, this is, however, in addition to the $1.2 billion cash call debt owed the partners in 2016, for which $400 million was paid in April. Baru, however, said that the NNPC will seek to balance the outstanding debts before April 2018. According to him, the upstream investments, which the corporation signed with multiple partners, attracted about $3.8 billion foreign direct investments to the oil and gas sector. He said this will serve as the means to fast-track its exit from the cash call era of funding oil and gas production in the country. He also said that, according to him, whatever profit that accrues afterward will be remitted to the government after deduction of production costs. Yes. Now, drawing a correlation between the quest for revenue and the federal government's anti-corruption campaign, Baru said the corporation staff must never allow corrupt practices to distract them from their major tasks. He said the NNPC was the first government agency in 2000 to get involved in government's anti-corruption campaign when the government mandated all its MDAs to establish in-house anti-corruption committees. He equally emphasized that with the prevailing global economic reality, The only survival strategy for the NNPC was to change from its old ways of doing business and embrace the best practice of transparency, accountability, and honesty with integrity. Now, still on the oil and gas sector, the Nigeria's oil and gas industry will require about $10 billion over the next 3 years to increase crude oil production from 2.2 million barrels per day to about 3 million barrels per day. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Ibe Kachuku, who made this disclosure in the current OPEC bulletin, said investment is needed to maintain essential work. Now, the OPEC bulletin comes up every month for readers to be updated on trends in the oil and gas sector across the globe. According to Kachuku, Nigeria's production level is about 2.2 million barrels per day, and the government would like to raise it to about 3 million barrels per day. Just to get the fields online and cap them will require an average of about $10 billion per year in investment over the next 3 to 4 years. Now, if you must increase production, you must, of course, definitely increase expenditure. But then, do we have that kind of money? There are also some dedicated projects in several oil fields to which Italy's Agip and a whole lot of others are all interested in investing and have promised to pump in a lot of money. But then, this infrastructure gap in the midstream and downstream sector of the oil and gas is about $30 billion or 40 billion to say the least. Now, saying that some of these required investments could come from Nigerians, we don't have to allow all the foreign investors to come and pump money into our oil and gas sector. But then, Kachuku also commented on refining direct purchase agreements, which were introduced last year, as well as associated crude for product exchange, whereby we give crude to an existing refining company that refines it for us and bring it back home. Because at the moment now, our own refining capacity is just about 10 to 15% of our requirements in this country. So to tackle the problem, the Petroleum Ministry decided that rather than have middlemen sell Nigerians products or import finished products, it tried to achieve synergy by giving crude to an established refinery to process it and bring it back to us. Well, away from the oil and gas sector now, let's look at the financial sector. We're talking about treasury bills, where the Honorable Minister of Finance says Nigeria plans to refinance $3 billion worth of maturing naira-denominated short-term treasury bills with dollar borrowing of up to 3 years. That is, we have to convert our naira loans to dollars for a 3-year tenure. It will lower the costs and improve its debt position as the economy recovers from recession. As it is, yes, we have even seen the IMF saying that Nigeria is expected to recover by a certain percentage. But then we feel in this country, according to the Minister of Finance, that we will recover at a greater percentage than what the World Bank is saying. She said the government could borrow at the cost of 7% overseas, roughly half of the interest rate it currently pays locally. Now, the dollars have been in short supply in Nigeria since the price of crude oil, which is the main source of our hard currency, plunged in mid-2014, which has triggered a currency crisis and an exodus of foreign investors because of our first recession in 25 years. Now, the government expects the economy to recover this year and grow by 2.2%, while the IMF sees our growth rate at just about 0.8%. Now, Nation said government was aiming to restructure its debt portfolio into longer-term maturities by borrowing more offshore and less at home to lower costs, and also support private sector assets to credit to boost the economy. Because as government continues to flood the capital market with treasury bills and bonds, that is thereby borrowing all the available cash, it is crowding out the private sector from having access to such long-term loans for the growth of their industries and, of course, the private sector and the economy in general. But let's hear her in this video, which is courtesy of OCTV.
The memo that I presented was, and was approved by Council, was as part of our efforts to restructure our debt portfolio. As you all know, we've got an approval in June that we would restructure our debt portfolio. We would borrow less in Naira and more in foreign currency because it's cheaper, and also because we want to prevent crowding out of the private sector. We want to create room for the private sector to be able to borrow so that they can grow and create jobs. So as part of that, we sought approval, and that was granted for us to refinance Treasury bills. As Treasury bills mature, we'll be refinancing them into dollars. Up to $3 billion worth of Treasury bills will be refinanced into dollars. So as the Naira Treasury bills mature, we'll be issuing dollar instruments. So we're not increasing our borrowings, we're simply restructuring. Instead of owing Naira, we'll be owing dollars. And the advantage to that is two things. One is cost reduction. The average rate at which we borrow internationally doesn't exceed 7%, whereas our Treasury bills, we're paying between 13.6 and 18.5. So we're almost halving the cost of borrowing, which is to try and relieve this pressure on debt service. As you know, there's a lot of controversy that our debt service is very high. So one of the things we're trying to do to relieve that is to refinance. The second thing is that we'll be extending the maturity profile of the debt. All our Treasury bills mature maximum 364 days. We'll be taking that borrowing out to up to 3 years, in the expectation that as the economy recovers and grows, we'll be in a much better position to repay, instead of just rolling over the debt, which we're doing at the moment. And the third thing is that by reducing government borrowing to the tune of $3 billion, we'll create more room for banks to lend to the private sector. And hopefully that will also create some downward pressure on interest rates. We won't be borrowing as much in Naira, and hopefully that will also begin to put pressure on interest rates, which we all agree need to come downwards. So that was the approval that was given. And as I say, it's part of our overall strategy aimed at reducing the cost of borrowing that was approved by FEC.
Meanwhile, Nigeria plans to sell about 62.43 billion naira of treasury bills this week by Wednesday. This is according to the central bank. Now, the bank plans to offer about 32.43 million naira in 3-month paper and 30 billion naira of 6-month bill, which results of the auction will be announced on the same day, definitely. But these bills are also in order to curb money supply in circulation, of course, finance the budget, and then help lenders to manage their liquidity. We'll take a short break now, but when we come back, we still go to how the federal government plans to expand its tax base, and of course, the synergy that the Nigerian government is having with other foreign nationals in terms of tax or revenue generation. Don't go away. We'll be right back. But remember, you can always watch this program and a whole lot of other programs through our social media platforms that will be shown on your screen shortly.
Liberty TV, Liberty. Liberty TV, Liberty. A station with a vision to build all nations. So interesting, educating, so keep on watching. A voice for all, a vision for all, keep on watching. Liberty TV. Yes, Liberty TV is now in Abuja. We started somewhere and we are going everywhere. Liberty TV is best in news, sports, entertainment, politics, interesting programs and lots more. Live in Abuja. You can now advertise on Liberty TV here in Abuja. For more enquiries, visit our office at number 12 Benghazi Street, Usezum 4, Abuja, or call the following numbers: 070-33 080-2756-132 or 080-271-00933. You can also log on to www.libertytvradio.com. Liberty TV, a station with a vision to build all nations. Your satisfaction is our obligation. Liberty TV, voice for all, vision for all. A station with a vision to build all nations. So interesting, educating, so keep on watching. A voice for all, a vision for all, keep on watching. Liberty TV.
Thank you for being there. Now, pursuant to the approval given by the Federal Executive Council in 2016, the federal government of Nigeria signed a double taxation treaty with the government of Singapore last week. The DTT is aimed at eliminating or providing relief for double taxation on income of companies and individuals that are resident in either of these countries. Now, one of the critical focus of the new tax policy in Nigeria is to widen Nigeria's tax treaty network. Now, the benefits of the DTT to both countries cannot be overemphasized given the history of trade relations that Nigeria has with Singapore. Now, the treaty is yet to be ratified by the National Assembly. Of course, it has to be because this is a major policy decision. But it is expected that the treaty will be ratified speedily to support the ongoing efforts of the government at improving the ease of doing business, and particularly the issue surrounding the payment of taxes in Nigeria. Now, there are currently a number of signed DTTs between Nigeria and other trade partners, which are pending for ratification at the National Assembly, definitely. A case in point is the DTT with Mauritius, which was signed in 2012. Can you imagine? Since 2012, the National Assembly has not been ratified, but still pending ratification by the National Assembly. It is expected that efforts will be unified across the various arms of government to fast-track the ratification of such DTTs, particularly with this Singapore and other nationals that have signed agreements with us. Well, moving on now on the program, we go on to the issues surrounding fraud by bank workers in Nigerian financial industry. Now, the management of the Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation said a total of about 8.68 billion naira were either stolen, reported as cases of frauds or forgeries, and of course, outright theft involving bank staffs in just 2016 alone. The figure is said to have even declined by about 48.1% from 18 billion naira recorded in 2015, while the actual loss to the nation's banking industry dropped by 24% from 3.1 billion naira in 2015 to about 2.1 billion naira in 2016. Now, the NDIC Managing Director and the Chief Executive, Alhaji Umar Ibrahim, who disclosed this while delivering a lecture on the role of mitigating corruption in the Nigerian banks at a general meeting of the Abuja chapter of the Alumni Association of all these accounting federations, said the level of attempted cases of frauds and forgeries declined by about 11% from say 2.7 billion naira in March 2017 to 2.4 billion naira in this year. Which means even this year, there had been cases of frauds against banking staffs, either fraud or some kind of forgeries to deprive or to reap investors and depositors of their hard-earned money, which is a very sad story. But then, we look at the MTEF now, that is the medium-term expenditure framework and, of course, fiscal strategy paper that was approved by the Federal Executive Council last week. The Federal Executive Council on Wednesday approved, that was Wednesday last week, approved the 2018 to 2020 medium-term expenditure framework fiscal strategy paper, which targets to achieve 7% growth by 2020. The Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udo Udoma, disclosed this at the end of the weekly meeting, which was presided, of course, by the acting president, Yemi Osinbajo, Oduma said in order to achieve the 7% growth rate by 2020, the federal government will target about 3.5% in 2018, 4.5% in 2019, and of course 7% by 2020. But anyway, let's hear him in this Oak TV footage.
Today approved a memorandum that was submitted by my ministry and approved the 2018 to 2020 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper. The highlights of it are that we are committed to achieving a 7% growth rate by 2020 at the end of the three-year plan in accordance with the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Indeed, the MTEF FSB is based on the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. In terms of the trajectory of getting to the 7%, we've approved a slightly different trajectory in the sense that by next year our target will be 3.5% in 2018, and in 2019 it will be 4.5%. Growth rate, and in 2020, of course, 7% growth rate. In terms of crude oil production, our estimate, projection for next year is 2.3 million barrels per day. We expect it to be broken down as 1.8 million barrels per day with regular crude, and then 500,000 barrels a day in terms of condensate. And the price that we've projected for next year is $45. We are also committed in the MTEF FSB to explore ways of raising additional revenues so as to reduce the debt service to revenue ratio. As the Minister of Finance said, that is part of the policy of this government to make sure that our borrowing is controlled and to make sure that we keep a reasonable debt service to revenue ratio, which will of course help also to bring down interest.
All right, the Minister of Transportation, Mr. Rotimi Amaechi, has said that the Kaduna-Abuja rail line is generating about 1 million naira every day. He said previously the government was spending 56 million naira per month while getting just about 500,000 naira per day. That is about 16 or so million naira. But now the situation has improved and government makes about 30 million naira per day, per month. Sorry, that's at 1 million naira per day. Now, according to him, the improvement is as a result of security situations along the Kaduna-Abuja road because of cases of rampant kidnappings, armed robbery situations. And so a lot of people now prefer to use the rail line than using their regular cars and all that. And then kudos to the Honorable Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amaechi, for putting an eagle eye on the rail service that has just been, it's just like a baby to this federal government. It was launched in this administration of Muhammadu Buhari. And even only recently, the minister has actually sacked some few ticketing officers and supervisors on the Abuja-Kaduna rail for fraudulent activities. Well, kudos to this government for an anti-corruption drive that is keeping everybody in check. All right, talking about anti-corruption and loans, we move on to AMCON. AMCON is faced with serious litigation and the recession that has hit a lot of companies, and these companies have not been able to pay their debt. So we have a huge profile of non-performing loans, well over 4.6 trillion naira over the years. Now, plans by the Asset Management Corporation, that is AMCON, and EFCC to jointly hunt down debtors said to be owing commercial banks over 4.6 trillion naira now appear heavily threatened by litigation, recession, and of course, Ghost Debtor syndrome. The gross debtor syndrome is a situation whereby, due to lack of proper due diligence, the banks could not carry out authentication of addresses of companies, and now they are nowhere to be found. Now, one of the big headaches is this issue of poor due diligence by these banks that are faced with non-performing loans. But today, AMCON and EFCC are also battling multiple litigations in various courts with recession, which has affected most of these businesses. Now, a lot of these businesses that had already been exposed to these loans, these bank unsecured loans, is because they have either fallen under due to recession, or they have actually reinvested in the capital market during the boom of the capital market, and so they have actually lost out, and so it is a huge problem. If you recall, during the tenure of the former governor of the central bank, now the Emir of Kano, Muhammadu Sanusi the third, it conducted a stress test on the deposit money banks. That was around 2009, and there was a huge exposure of several non-performing loans and unsecured loans, and which prompted the formation of this company, AMCON, and strengthening it. And then AMCON now provided about 2.2 trillion naira to support these banks. And then most of these bank chief executives were actually detained, and a lot of people lost their money and all that. But the EFCC and the AMCON today are coming in together. They have vowed to actually revisit, reinvestigate, and of course duly prosecute debtor banks implicated in the massive non-performing loans, along with their internal and external collaborators. All right, finally on the program today, we look at the economic cost of Nigeria's many public holidays. Yes, everybody loves a public holiday. People want to rest at home, either Salah, Christmas, Easter, Maulud, whatever kind of public holiday. But it appears from the records or figures from the National Bureau of Statistics, it has highlighted the huge economic cost of public holidays in the country. According to the report that was given 2 weeks ago, that Nigeria loses about 9.7 billion naira annually as a result of different public holidays declared by the federal government. Now, about 15 days were reportedly observed as national holidays in 2016. And now, if you do the math, you will find that you have about 81,000 staffs, workers, who spend about 37 million man hours to contribute 29 trillion naira to the economy, and at average productive rate of 783 naira 51 kobo, who have gone to sleep because of public holidays. If you do the math, it will give you close to 10 billion naira per annum in terms of losses to the federation. Even though these figures are being disputed by a lot of experts, it is said that the figures are actually understated. But then we all agree here that there are huge costs attached to, or huge revenue losses attached to public holidays that Nigerians enjoy. Well, I guess this wraps up the show for the day, but we'll leave you with our regular graphics of a review of activities on the floor, a weekly review of activities on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange during the last week. Of course, the Forex market as it stood as at last working day of the week, that was Friday last week. And then, of course, the cost of some commodities across some Nigerian markets. Very many thanks indeed for watching. Let's do this again tomorrow. I am Umar Kaltungo. Good morning.